Hi everyone, this is Ollie Ride. You're listening to Night Ride FM.
Mm, mm.
This is Lemon from Thoppings, and you're listening to Night Ride FM.
Hello, hackers. Welcome to Saturday Hacker Day. My name is Taggart, and as usual on Saturdays, we're going to do some blue team stuff today. But before we get going with the main material, we have quite a bit of cyber news after a couple weeks of slow news weeks. We have quite a few stories that I wanted to talk about today, so let's jump right into it. First off, we have a story from Microsoft. Actually, we have two stories from Microsoft this week. The first regards a rootkit that Microsoft admits to signing. Not the best when when that takes place. So as you probably know, when a developer creates an application for uh, for Microsoft, they have to sign the code with, or Microsoft has to sign and approve the code um, in order for it to be installed, especially fully into the Microsoft system. Now, apparently, Microsoft signed a malicious driver that seems to be related to a malware or threat actor operating out of the PRC. And so Microsoft has, after researchers disclosed this, has admitted to the signing, and they'll presumably revoke the certificate um, and handle that issue. But it does seem like something's definitely slipped through the cracks there. As a matter of fact, a couple of things slipped through the cracks. We now know a little bit more information about last year's, unbelievably, SolarWinds compromise that was perpetrated by the Nobelium Group. We now know that, well, we did know already that Microsoft was a victim of the Nobelium Group that accessed multiple organizations through a supply chain compromise from the SolarWinds Orion product. And Microsoft was a customer of SolarWinds to manage their own inventory of assets. And it turns out that one of the things that the attackers did in Microsoft's case was actually phish one of their support representatives. And through that phishing attack, compromised customer information and then used that information to gain access into those Microsoft customers. Now, those customers have been contacted and remediation is underway, but it does once again show a couple of things here. One, how sophisticated the Nobelium Group really was in their tactics, techniques, and procedures. In addition to the SolarWinds compromise we knew, now we know that social engineering was part of the mix. It was definitely a coordinated and widespread campaign, and I doubt that we've seen the last of that threat group or actors that were involved in that threat group. Moving on from Microsoft onto Dell, it turns out that we have a story about the Dell Support Assist tool which is used to upgrade firmware on Dell machines. And in particular, there's a component of it called BIOS Connect, which turns out had a number of vulnerabilities that could be chained together to indicate or to achieve remote code execution. So long story short, the way that this vulnerability works is that the traffic could be man in the middle, right? The certificate from Dell could be spoofed, and then interaction with the endpoint could be achieved from a person in the middle attacker, a machine in the middle attacker, that could then send malicious firmware back to the BIOS of the machine, and essentially give you not just a rootkit, but what's known as a bootkit, where the malicious code was actually in the firmware of the machine so that the operating system itself would never know that it was there, right? So it could be operating and running, and no part of the OS would really be aware or potentially be aware that it's there. What's interesting, in addition to this, the fact that it was a chain of attacks here, was, well, this is not the first time that Dell Support Assist has had a problem. In May of 2019, there was another RCE vulnerability reported in Dell Support Assist. So pretty nasty. I know that there's been some discussion about Windows firmware or BIOS firmware being updated through the Windows Store rather than using these third-party tools. And as much as I have some issues with the Windows Store, that might be a good idea, at least just to reduce the number of potential attacks. Let me try that again. In order to reduce the attack surface area in general, so that you have one kind of authoritative source for firmware that OEMs would use to push their updates to firmware. Linux repositories have kind of solved this problem now. Most repositories now allow Linux firmware updates, and so you kind of have that same idea of a blessed source for your firmware upgrades coming from the repository host for your Linux distribution. So it would be good to see Windows kind of get away from leaving so much of that to the OEMs. I don't love centralized control, but at the same time, I'll take centralized control from Microsoft, at least as the blessed source, over these OEMs, which we all know provide quite a lot of bloatware and other problems when they deploy their own tools for these kinds of updates. You know, the first thing I do when I get a new Windows machine, if it's from, you know, Lenovo or Dell or something like that, is nuke whatever installation of Windows they have on there from the factory, because I don't want their nonsense on there, and do a clean install. So the closer we can get to a clean install of Windows across the board, I think the better we'll all be. All right, last bit of news. This is kind of an interesting one. A very old vulnerability, I believe, circa 2018, but just getting exploited. A number of Western Digital MyBook owners woke up a few days ago to discover that the data on their network-attached external storage drives, right, these large external storage devices, had been remotely wiped. And it turns out that there was a vulnerability in these Western Digital devices that had been around for some time, but some actor had decided to take advantage of it, and the fact that the UPnP protocol had exposed these devices to the internet and basically created a massive target environment for these attackers. That's pretty much the story, and I think, you know, a couple of things we want to discuss here. For one thing, it shouldn't be that difficult to patch these devices. Angel's absolutely correct, saying that the Western Digital MyBook Live devices received their final firmware update in 2015, but then since then, a remote code execution vulnerability tracked as CVE 2018-18472 was disclosed, along with a public proof of concept exploit. Okay, so final firmware update in 2015, proof of concept deployed in 2018, now it's 2021, and these devices are still out and operational. Really nasty. But it's important to note, you know, that these devices are expected to last a long time. Now, not everybody is going to be tech savvy enough to, you know, constantly update their storage devices. Even if you imagine kind of an on the outset lifespan for Rust disks of around 5 to 7 years, right? It's entirely possible that some of those end-of-life devices should be still in operation. And the idea that the vendor would just stop supporting it is, I think, pretty problematic, especially because Western Digital is still kicking around. It's not like the company went out of business. So that seems a little bit irresponsible on their part to just stop supporting the device. But I think that's one takeaway. The other takeaway is the danger of universal plug and play, the protocol that allows you to kind of connect a network device. And this is what Xboxes, game consoles use to connect to the internet. And even some game programs will utilize UPnP to open their specialized ports through your router. So basically the way that UPnP works is you connect a device that needs a special port open from the internet into your home, and it will work with your router to negotiate that port forwarding and make sure that that's open. Okay, cool. The problem is that now you have an open port from your router to the internet, right? Not just outbound traffic, but inbound traffic, rather than it just denying all. And it's extremely problematic, especially when we have people who are using tools like Shodan to go look for open ports across devices connected to the internet. And so if you have this vulnerability, and it's especially if it's a specialized port that's easy to identify, now you have just this really, really easy issue, or this easy search you can perform for vulnerable devices so attackers can take advantage of it. So one of the first things you want to do is kind of disable universal plug and play on any router that you have on your home network. Now, I know that's a big ask for a lot of people, but it's definitely something that we should be considering, and we should be considering it even with these newer kind of out of the box, easy setup mesh wireless devices. Hey, Cenobite, thank you so much for the follow. One of the things that we want to think about if you're using one of these Ubiquiti devices or the Eros or even the Google Home, if you hate yourself and your privacy, is making sure that those protocols are disabled so that you yourself have to make the choice whether to open a port to the internet. And if you do, then we can have the conversation about, do we segment off that kind of stuff from the network, or we create a different LAN or even a VLAN that has good access control, so that kind of our Internet of Things devices in our homes, yes, they can be convenient, but that they're not, spying on us or intercepting network traffic or, doing something else that we don't want them to do in our environment. Hey, Halxon, thank you again. Welcome, and thank you for the follow. All right, I think that's about it for the news this week. And so we're gonna pop into the main material, which we're gonna use Rangeforce to do today. But what we're gonna do on Rangeforce is something I think doesn't get enough coverage. Saturdays are blue team days, and what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be working with Splunk. Now, I use Splunk in my day job. It is probably one of the most popular SIEM SIEM solutions out there. Not cheap, but learning how to use Splunk well is definitely a bit of a skill. It's a bit of an art to understand how to parse through all that data, how to use some data analytics tools to explore what you have and how to get it exactly what you're looking for, especially in a threat hunting context, things like that. So we're going to use the Rangeforce platform to explore Splunk today. And as a reminder, this is a teaching stream, so if you ever have any questions, you want us to dive deeply into something, that's definitely what we're here for. So don't hesitate to reach out and chat. If you have a question, we will, if I don't know the answer, I will try to find out so that we can all learn from it. All right, let's get going. All right, so here I am in Rangeforce. I've got my, let me get the tunes back going. I have my Rangeforce platform up, ready to go. Angel, I absolutely agree that Splunk is a never-ending learning path. There's so much there. The SPL language is Turing complete, so you can really do quite a bit of it. You can do quite a bit with it. And as a matter of fact, I think it's a really great introduction, if you think about it this way, to functional programming. right? So on Wednesday I was doing Haskell, and Rust has functional components to it as well. I really believe that it's important to learn some of those concepts. Actually, does anyone want to take a guess what the most popular, if you want to think about it this way, what the most popular functional programming language is? Most widely used functional programming language in the world, and it's not even close. God, how old is this version of GNOME? Nope, not Python, although Python can be functional. Grommet, good guess. SQL. I would say that there's one even more popular than SQL. And SQL is declarative in a certain way. Angel, what is a functional language? What a great question. Okay, so a functional language is a language where functions are the first-class citizens. Where rather than in a declarative or imperative language, which Python technically is, or C, or most of the languages that we're familiar with, the concept in these languages is that you write instructions in order. Now you have flow control, things like that, but you're writing instructions in order, and then the computer executes those. The concept in functional languages is that what you're doing is you are composing functions to transform data from one shape to a final shape, and the entire run of the program is just that function composition. So JavaScript can be written functionally, but it is imperative in nature. It can kind of do both. There is the language that I'm thinking of is Excel. Microsoft Excel is a functional programming language, and it is used more than any other functional language by far. If you think about what you do in Excel functions, you are creating this composition of instructions to create the data transformation that you're after. It is absolutely a functional language, and certainly even people who wouldn't consider themselves programmers use it to achieve essentially programming outcomes. All right, let's full screen this thing. Oh, I just get letterboxes? That's not helpful. Yeah, Neon, I mean, I guess it's kind of a hot take, but I really do. I mean, Excel we know is Turing complete. People have created games and all sorts of stuff in Excel. And the way that you work with those Excel functions, really does represent that. And but if you want to kind of dive down into the history of functional languages, right, you can actually go and look up. So you have COBOL, right, which is one of the first. Am I thinking of COBOL? Yeah. Right. So COBOL kind of was started in 1959, right? One of the first programming languages. And then Fortran was a little bit 1957. So right, Fortran came first, kind of one of the first programming languages. Now Fortran was imperative as a programming language, but then you had this other branch of computer science that was developing another kind of programming language, and for that you're talking about Lisp. And Lisp was the first functional programming language. And you can see, 1958, so a year after Fortran was developed. But the way that Fortran works is a lot different. The way that Lisp works is a lot different. You can see here that there are going to be a lot of parentheses, but the idea here is that you're creating a list of 1 and 2, and then you're concatenating it with this other list. And then notice how arithmetical operators go first. So this is the function, and this is the arguments to it, and this is the entire expression inside of parentheses. It's a really fascinating way of doing programming. And you can see even the if is itself a function, right? And it takes other functions as arguments. It's a really fascinating way to think about programming. And if you want to play with this kind of thing, Racket is a modern Lisp that is great for learning functional programming. Neon, is asking, just to be clear, you're specifically talking about the Excel formulas, not the VBA stuff that you can embed in spreadsheets. Really, really good question and great point of clarification. Yeah, I'm talking about Excel functions, the stuff that you put in the cells, right? Not macros, not anything else like that. Visual Basic is definitely an imperative language, and it's also not that commonly used. If you compare how much people write VB macros to how many people put functions inside of Excel spreadsheets, right? It's, the VB stuff is a rounding error. So yeah, I'm definitely talking about the Excel functions themselves as a functional language. But yeah, racketlang.org if you want to play with a functional language. Really, really fun stuff. All right, but back into the main material it's supposed to be doing. It's so easy to get me off onto like a programming language history or like linguistics of programming languages tangent. Okay, so you are a new systems and security operations analyst at Buttercup Games. You could not pay me enough to work at a game company, but that's okay. Your company has a Splunk instance which is fed by web transactions, okay, database activity, and system security logs. Love it. So we should see like web proxy stuff, so we should see HTTP traffic, system security logs, so we're thinking Windows events, and database activity. It depends on what the database is, so we'll get there. You need to get familiar with this data as well as the search capabilities that Splunk has to offer. Great. All right, let's log in. So we're going to open splunk.lab. I'm going to open that in Chromium here. I absolutely love, I think it's very funny that the Rangeforce machines have straight up internet access. Like, could you use, I'm not recommending this, but I'm just curious, like, could you use Rangeforce machines as kind of like a C2? Like, what if I installed ngrok on this and got like a public IP that I could then use to like host stuff on it? That'd be insane to do, and you'd get caught pretty much immediately. But I just think it's funny that they're giving you this kind of absolute, there may be some limitations, but it does feel like it's a pretty wide open environment, especially when you think about how like the machines on TryHackMe are so locked down, like you can't ping Google on those TryHackMe machines, but here I can. Yep. Oh, Neon, I'm sorry. If I get too jargony, definitely call me out on it. Yes, command and control. So when we talk about command and control, it would be the framework that attackers would use to manage any of the payloads and the agents that they've deployed to gain remote control of a target machine. Okay, so admin and Rangeforce is our login here. Yep. As a matter of fact, on Tuesday, I think I'm going to be doing for Attack on Tuesday, for our Red Team stream, I'm going to be doing some alternative C2 frameworks, things like Covenant and Mythic. So if you want to tune in for that, then you'll get to see some of that. Hey, Kaiser, good to see you. All right, so we're logged into Splunk. Yes, this is what Splunk looks like. We don't have any apps installed. Usually in an enterprise deployment, you would see some apps installed from Splunk base. Can we install some of these? That would be cool. Is there like a threat intel one? I think Alien Vault has one, right? No? Kaiser, I'm kind of doing CTFs. We're going through the Rangeforce Splunk training just to get better. So, Angel, log parsing apps would be good. Hopefully the logs that we have been parsed by the admins. Anyway, if we look at our data inputs, we have 12 files and directories that we're pulling from. All this is just, okay, so there's that. Let's see, what else do we have? Source types. We're kind of going off the beaten path here, but we're taking a look at how Splunk is configured. I'll zoom this in so it's a little bit easier to see. Now these are the built-in ones. I'm wondering if all of these are present. I doubt it very much. Let's see what our indices look like. Okay, so we have audit, internal, introspection, and main. Okay. Let's see what our data models look like, if we have any. Okay, not really. Let's go back to search and reporting and actually do what they're asking us to do. Right. So here's the page tour. Search. We have analytics, which I'll be honest, I almost never use. Mostly I'm going to be doing search. Here are our data sets. This is where Splunk is pulling its data from. So we have multiple sources here, right? And you can pull, so the way that Splunk works, just as a, I'm wondering if there's a good Splunk architecture diagram. I wonder if there is a good one of these. Wow. Actually, yeah, this rules. This is a good one. So this is kind of how Splunk gets its information. Because remember, the idea with a SIEM, SIEM, is you are centralizing all the events in your environment into one aggregated platform so that you can search across those events to understand what's going on in your environment. To make that happen, right, you don't want to have just like a single server that's collecting everything. You're going to DOS it immediately. So what Splunk does is it uses these services called forwarders. Now, forwarders can live on independent devices, right? Or they can kind of be distributed in a different way to aggregate. They can act like syslog servers and then forward on. And what they will do is collect logs, and then they are specifically looking at file sources to look for, and then they will forward those files to indexers. What indexers do is they parse through those logs and create a search index. So you're not always parsing through the raw logs when you perform a search. You're searching through the index, so it's like cache searching, basic search theory. The indexers then report up to something called a search head, and the search head is where you're actually performing your searches. So what we're accessing here, in this Splunk interface is the search head, but the data that we're getting is being fed from the indexers, which in turn are getting their data from any forwarders that we have in the environment. Now, Splunk does allow you to create kind of cool alerts, or sorry, reports and dashboards. I really do like dashboards. They're really helpful, especially for leadership. And basically what a dashboard is you create a query, a search, and then you save it. And you can create kind of panels of them, so you can have kind of a real-time, dashboard of things that you care about in your environment. So for example, I have a couple of threat hunting dashboards that I use at work, and we'll do things like create kind of Windows events that we would care about, right? Are we seeing potential Kerber roasting? Are we seeing enumeration of S&P shares? Are we seeing high, rates of failed logins? Things like that. And you want to be able to see all that in one place, and that's what dashboards are useful for. But we're going to be spending most of our time today, I think, in the search window. And we're going to be learning the Splunk language here. All right, so let's see what our instructions are. We're going to build a basic query. So, right. So one of the things that that Rangeforce is trying to tell us is that even though there is a syntax to the Splunk language, you can just search for individual terms and it will look across all of the fields that it has parsed for that term. It's a really bad idea, but you can do it. So, did it want us to do all time? Oh, it did. Okay, so this is a bad idea. Don't do this in real life, right? You're searching for a single term all time, right? You're gonna really hammer your search head and your indexers if you do this. Now, luckily, there's not a whole lot of content here for us to search through, but if you're in a real environment, you're talking about millions of events. Exactly, Angel. In this case, it's a baby environment, so it's not a problem, but in real life, you really want to specify your search so that you're not hammering your indexers in that way, or the search head. But one of the things that's cool, so we see failed across the board, and then what you're going to get in Splunk is this kind of timeline that gives you how many events per time interval the search head found. And even this can be useful because you might be able to see something really spiky, even here, without having to do any other analysis. And then below that, you're going to see the list of events. Now, in the center, you're going to see kind of the quick view of the events. And you can expand each one of them to see the parsed fields here, individual fields. And you're going to be able to see the raw if you want. There's not a whole lot more raw here, but if there were more text than a single line, you could expand it down to view the raw. And yes, so one of the things that you want to do is kind of understand if there's a baseline across your time horizon here. And if you do see something that's abnormal, you have to ask yourself why. Maybe there's a reason why it's spiky and it's totally legitimate, but maybe there's something going on that shouldn't be. And remember that Splunk is as much a tool for the operations team as it is for the security team. So for example, failed logins, Windows event 4625. That can happen if somebody's trying to brute force a user account and you haven't set up lockouts or something like that. But it can also happen just if a machine has been turned off for a long time, turns back on, and it has lost its secure trust relationship with the domain in an Active Directory environment. And until that secure trust is reestablished by an administrator, you're going to see those failed logins spike again and again and again and again. And that's not malicious. It's just kind of how Active Directory works. Right, multiple users trying to connect through DC. So, times of day, you're going to see, rises and falls in your events, right? And you have to normalize that. That's a process called baselining. And it takes more than a day. It takes a long time to understand what's normal for your environment. But once you do that, you're able to understand when things are strange. Yeah, Angel, great points. You're talking about logons and DNS. DNS is one of my favorite ones to search for just because it can be so revealing. But at least for now, until we get DNS over HTTPS. But DNS is also difficult because there's so many events that you really have to be accurate with your searches or strategic with your searches. So you can see here we have these parsed fields, and I'm also going to call out here really important fields that Splunk itself is going to be generating. So host is where the thing is coming from, only coming from server for this search. But notice that there's two sources, okay? These are the files that it's pulling from, and then the source types. These sources and source types will become things that we search on specifically to narrow our search to just a specific kind of data that we want to look for in our Splunk environment. Let's go on to our next instruction here. Search results. Okay, we kind of just did this. Okay, what is the we finally have some questions to answer here. What is the date of the most recent event? Now, by default, Splunk is going to show us dates, events in descending time order. So the most recent event should be first. So the answer here would be 5/27/20. And the username of the most recent failed login. Now, unfortunately, the username field has not been parsed, which is unfortunate, but we could extract it in certain ways. But we can see here that the user that is failed here, the most recent, is Ubuntu. So we'll just put that down as our answer. And then the source, which we were looking at before, let's expand that event. Were they talking about when the event came in or happened? Yeah, so that's actually a good point. Notice that in this case, at least to this level of precision, pretty much the same thing. Now, this field that you see here actually doesn't get pulled from this. That's a great point. The time, the underscore time, is when it's ingested by the forwarder. Okay? But, right? That's that hidden time field. That's what you're seeing there. And it can be the case that there's like maybe up to 1 second. Exactly, Angel, right? There can be a delay when the log and when the event actually happened. I think here they were just looking for the time field rather than the timestamp. That's a really great call out. And you want to be aware of that. If you're looking for events that happen within a couple of seconds, you really do need to give yourself a little bit of that flex time to account for that delay between the actual event timestamp and the ingestion into Splunk. Especially if you're responding to an alert that came from a different tool, like if you're responding to an alert that came from your intrusion detection system or from, an EDR or something like that. You are going to have to, it's going to be close but not exact. Okay, so the source was var log Splunk default. Alrighty. Did I not do something for... Oh, that was just... Yes. That's what we're in, I guess. Add root to the search field and rerun the search. So we're looking for failed root. And do notice that it's not case sensitive, right? There's a capital F here, but not in our search. So, next question. Oh, that was just it? Oh, yeah, good call. Field names are case sensitive, absolutely. Search terms, not case sensitive. Field names, case sensitive. How many events contain both failed and root? That's this number up here, 7,283. So now we're going to search for failed password for root. And quoting it will mean an exact match. 7,282. That was literally the end of this one. Okay, well, good news, we have other labs that we're going to do. Actually, before we leave here, strings need to be quoted, terms not, although watch out for spaces. One of the things we're going to do, just real quick, just to show you the power that we have here in Splunk and why people pay for it, let's do a quick visualization of these. So right now we have this here, but what if we wanted to see specifically or a better chart across the time, right? So we have a little bit of a better view. Let's just pipe this, and piping is how we do this, right? We'll pipe it to the time chart function, and we'll just do a count. And we go over to visualization, and now we have this cool chart that actually shows us the events a little bit better. I'm going to turn it into an area chart, just because I like this visualization a little bit better. Now, we also can add a second variable. We don't have a lot of fields to work with here, but we could add a second variable that we could extract if we wanted to, even with regular expressions, which might be kind of fun. Actually, let's do that before we leave here. So I'm going to search for failed password. So you see we got a lot more, right? Now we're going to actually pipe something else. Before we get to our time chart, we're going to do a second pipe using the rex function. And this is pretty cool. I'm going to do field equals raw, and then I'm going to use kind of this, it's a placeholder. We have to change this up a little bit. So what we're doing is we're using a regular expression to create a new field. And this right here is how we create the named field. So I'm going to do, if we look at our events, which we actually can't do with this time chart, but we know that it was like failed password 4, right? So we have the word for and then the username. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that and basically do this. We're going to say for space and then user and yeah, I will remove the time chart in a second. Okay, so notice that right now my regular expression says root from. So what I want to do is add the word from on the outside of this named group. And all of a sudden, now I have invalid user, right? But this is just a quick and dirty way to show you that we can extract a new field with a regular expression. And now what I can do is take that time chart again, and I can do count by user. Going back over to our visualization, now all of a sudden you can see that the area chart is separated out by the user. Now we have this massive other here, which we can remove with use other equals false. And this is just like the other things. So you can see that root was kind of our worst offender here, but also we have invalid users. Kind of interesting. But you can see that it was kind of across this entire time. It wasn't necessarily a spike in this time in our time frame here, but root has a lot of failed logins. If we wanted to investigate further, going back to our events, we could actually extract the IP address the same way and then analyze that. And that might actually give us some other idea of what our brute force, if there was a brute force attempt, we would see that. In fact, let's just do that. Yep. So we know that we have the word from, and then the source IP, and then the word port, right? So that's going to give us not just the user field, but also the source IP, right? And even without doing anything else, the count that we see when we look at the field shows that this 87.194 is far and away our worst offender. But we don't know the timing, and that's why we like the time chart for this. So we can, once again, time chart this and do something like time chart count by source IP. Yes, Angel is asking, this is what the log parsing applications do. Yes, you write parsers to do this specifically, but very often the logs come in and let's say you're not the Splunk administrator and you're just the user. You might have to extract new fields to search on in real time during your query, and this is one way to do it. Yep, let's get that use other out of there. Okay, so look at that. We have ourselves a spike. Now, we have activity from this 87.194 kind of across this time, but it does seem like on the 23rd, they went a little bit harder, right? Even just from like a statistical standpoint, it does look like if we were going to look at the standard deviation of this data set, this is more than 1 sigma or 1.5 sigmas away from the variance here. So very, very well could be something to be concerned about. And then, we might actually, if this was an external IP, which it looks like, we could take that IP and, search it in virus total and see if there's any reason to be concerned. Yeah, a day after vacation, it's a Saturday. So, I mean, it's possible, but anyway, so we're actually done with this module. We were just playing around. So let's head over to the next exercise. Gromit, use other. So anything that doesn't have, like, it's not no IPs, it's kind of like if it falls below the threshold to kind of play in the big leagues with the other counts, it's going to group them into other, right? And so it's just like, here's everything else. And if we say use other equals false, it'll suppress that noise. So we're just looking at the top values. There's also a use null that does the same thing. So if there's a null value for that field, it'll show it by default. But if you set use null to false, it'll go away. All right, let's see what we have for filters and queries. Is it still non-top 10 or 15? Yeah, that's exactly right, Angel. And I believe that the number is customizable if we go to time chart here. If we look at the time chart reference, yeah, there's a limit that we can set if we wanted to expand that list. Right? Specifies the limit for the number of distinct values of the split by field to return. And to your point, exactly right. By default, it's the top 10. There we go. By the way, if you are a Splunk user, I mean, this reference, the Splunk documentation, takes some practice to learn how to read, but once you do, it's quite excellent. It really is. Alrighty. Let's see what we got going on. We'll pop back into this. the reason I kind of went like that is because in the last environment, I had to change Chromium to not use the system title bars and borders, and this one I didn't, and I was like, did it save my history? But no, there's no bash history or anything like that, so I don't think so. Just for whatever reason, that was set correctly in this one. Okay, so we're going to go to splunk.lab. And what is it? Splunk and Rangeforce. Was admin? Yeah. Okay, we're logged in. Filtering by time. Feels like SPL is similar to JQ, as in pipe in data. Very much so. You know, it's funny you mentioned JQ because actually one of the things that Splunk really struggles with is JSON data, especially nested JSON data. XML as well. You can do it. There's a function called tstats. Nope. SPath, not T. I always get those confused. SPath, which parses in real time XML or JSON content, but man, it is tough, and it's a big ask. Yeah, there's a lot in JQ to learn. I was messing with JQ a little bit for the Hack Summer challenge machine, which is nearly finished. I had to rewrite the entire quiz engine in Rust, which finally got finished yesterday. All right, filtering by time. Yes, one of the things you can do with that timeline. Let's just go to search and reporting and just search for all time. And let's do that search again that they had us do, where it's search failed. If you double click on any one of these time bins, it will take you to that time window. So in this case, it would be the day of May 8th. And then now you can do by hours, things like that. And you can see that the time field here got updated. Exactly right. So you can also click select and then, yeah, zoom to selection right here. Okay. Search failed password for root, including quotation marks. The question is how many events during the 4 days starting on May 6th, 2020. So the 6th to the 10th, right? So let's choose the 6th to the 10th, and we'll zoom to the selection, and we get 1005 through May 9th. And what IP address was seen on the last event of May 2, 2020? The last event. So we just want to go to May 2nd. So we can actually do it this way. Let's use the date range here. So May 2nd to May 2nd. This is kind of cool. If you choose the same day, it knows what's going on. So the last event, the IP address was 12.130.65. Sort minus time would actually give us the first event, Angel, not the last. But yes, if we wanted to get the first event of the day, we would do sort minus underscore time. or no, actually, my bad. Sort time will actually reverse what we have, right? And so, Angel, you are correct. But the truth is that that's going to be the order that it's in by default anyway. Yeah. Okay. How many failed logins with user Tomcat were there before May 15th, 2020? Okay, so we're basically going to go... Let's go all time, and then May 15th. So we're going to go back here. And specifically, we're looking for failed logins, failed password for Tomcat. Let's try failed Tomcat. 254. Invalid user Tomcat. Interesting. Okay. But so 254, I think is what we're after here. And how many times was there an SSHD session open between May 17th and May 23rd? Okay, so... Session opened. That's what we want. That's our indicator for a session start. So we're going to search for that. And we're going to search specifically for what time range? Between May 17th and May 23rd. Between May 27th, so actually the 22nd. $544, I hope. No. So did it actually mean May 23rd? Like through May 23rd? 647. There we go. Not so when I hear the term, when I hear between, right, in my head, it's I go like between the start of May 17th and like the end point for me is non-inclusive, right? If I were to say from May 17th and through the 23rd, then that would be inclusive. But the word between to me doesn't include the 23rd, but whatever. English, what are you gonna do? Yes, we also have a date and time range. How many events include Googlebot? Change language. You know, I don't know if there are any other human languages that are more specific, more precise across the board. Does anybody know, though, fun language fact, does anybody know which language breaks the fewest of its own rules grammatically? Or breaks its own rules the least, I think is probably a better way to say it. The answer is Korean. In part because it was so tightly governed. And what are we looking for? We're looking for May 1st at 5 p.m. to May 4th at 8 a.m. May 1st, 5, May 4th. Nope, date and time range. I do not like this selector. 1700 to, oh wait, May 1st, right? And to May 4th at 0800. $363. What is the version of the Googlebot? 2.1. How many times was category.screen loaded on April 29th between 1400 and 1430? Oh, weird. So, was that April 29th? Yes. Between 1400 and 1430. Would it kill them to create a time picker on this? $7,700. All right, 7,718. Oh no, it has to be like this. That's the search term. $3,037. Because that's the load. What? What on earth is the problem with this one? It said, how many times was category.screen loaded on April 29th between 1400 and 1430? So I'm on the right day. 1400, 2 p.m. to 2:30. Oh. It's the wrong day. Yeah, it was just the wrong day. 7. I was gonna say, that's a lot of event. Okay, now they're just being... Do they want 26? Okay. We know that that's not true. The way that they asked that, how many times is category.screen loaded? Load, from what we're seeing here, is a GET request here. Right? If we look at this HTTP request, this is a post, and what is this? This is our source, right? So, yeah. Oh, sorry, this is our referrer. So the referrer is actually category.screen. It wasn't loaded here. So we got the right answer for them, but their question was wrong. Yeah, no, I don't like poor questions. Right, finally, we're going to do some querying using fields. So we're actually going to get to use some of these things here. Search for source type equals access combined W cookie, which we already saw. So this is how we access fields, right? So we put the field name and then the value. Now, because it's a single string, we don't need quotes around it, or it's an unspaced string, we don't need quotes around it. And then this is all time. So this will look for all events of this source type. Quite a few. Now, they might not get to this, so I'm going to call it out here. All right, thanks, Angel. Thanks for hanging out. Enjoy your meal. I'm going to call it out here. If you have a massive environment and you have so many events to search through, you may not have the capability of getting all of them in your query. That might just be too much. To fix that, Splunk has the ability to sample. So basically, if there's a statistical probability that you're going to find the kind of event that you're looking for inside of a sample of that set, of that query, a subset of it, you can set that up. So you can get every 10th, every 100th, every 1000th, every 10,000th, every 100,000th, or you can do a custom sampling. And that will definitely increase your search time, and it'll reduce the load on your search heads and your indexer. But if you're looking for one specific event, then the odds get better and better as you narrow your time range that you're going to miss it. I'm sorry, the odds get better and better as you expand your time range that you're going to miss it. And so you want to be, when you're looking for specific events, if you have a big environment, you want to try to get your time horizon as narrow as possible to start, and then you can zoom out to look for correlated events, things like that. Okay, how many events have the source type that we just searched for? 131, 645. How many events have the action value set to purchase? That's how we do that. 19,235. So how many times had a action equals purchase had a refer domain? So we're going to say, remember that that's a field, right? Refer domain. And by the way, you can click on these fields over here and then click any of the values you see to add it to your search. What's the value we're looking for? Google.com. So I can actually just click on this refer domain and go to google.com up here, see how it has added that to my search. Now, the other criterion that they were looking for was since May 18th. So we'll get those events. So that's 6 events since May 18th. Okay. And then, right, one of the things that's important is that these are the interesting fields that Splunk thinks you're going to care about, but there may be new ones, or there may be others. And if you click all fields, you'll see the others that you may want to see. So for example, URI might be of use to us. And there's the selected field there, right? Yeah, Gromit, what's your question about quotes? Are quotes recommended? So quotes are recommended certainly if you have a space in your query. Watch what happens. Let's see what happens when we turn off the quotes here. Nothing. Okay. So quotes, I use quotes around my values just for standardization in my queries. But if there are no spaces, Splunk knows what to do because it's kind of parsing the tokens, saying, okay, before the equal sign, it's a field, but after the equal sign, it's the value, right? And then space separated. So that's kind of how it's dealing with it. One thing you do have to watch out for, though, in the event of, especially like Windows events, is that there are some things you have to escape. So if I were looking for example, like a user in a work group, right? Or a domain, if I had like My caps locked? Weird. If I do workgroup and I had this backslash, right, for the user, I would have to escape that by doing a double backslash. So just be aware of that. You do have to escape certain characters, just like you would in other text parsing. But yeah, quotes are recommended. I think they matter, especially for standardization. But if you have spaces in your value, you absolutely need quotes. All right, where are we? Set the time picker to all time, search for source type. All right, and then what are we doing? Oh, how many values are there for the file field? There are 11. What is the event coverage percentage of the field product ID? Meaning, how many events, what percentage of the events have that? 95.68. What is the most common value of the user agent field? Ancient Firefox, I guess. And how many contain the URI path of search.do? $16. Okay. That was good. Now, we'll try the next module, but if we're ready to go a little bit faster, I think what I might do is hop over to Try Hack Me and do their, because they have the Splunk boss of the SOC stuff, which might actually be more valuable. Well, okay, let's see. Fields and transforms. Yeah, let's do this. Yeah, so right, Cyber Defenders has it as well. The only difference is that on Try Hack Me, right, you don't have to download the VM; they're hosting it for you. And with Cyber Defenders, you download the VirtualBox image and start it up on your own machine, which I can do, but you know, just for stream time, right? I just get it going. I definitely, if you want to do more with Splunk, I highly recommend checking out. Let's check it out on Cyber Defenders just real quickly. Checking out. Oh, they changed up. Yeah, there we go. So the Splunk boss of the SOC stuff, I've done a couple of streams on these, but they are great training tools and provided by Splunk itself. But you see it's gigantic, 12 gigs, right? And so I recommend doing the Try Hack Me version if you don't feel like setting up all of this by yourself. But it has really cool questions to answer about what's going on in the environment. This is a good blue team CTF. Really, really solid. All right, let's get this going. Yeah, they're hard. Here's the thing. Blue team is hard. It's really hard. Now, not to say that offensive security isn't hard. It's very technical. It's very challenging. But the truth is that it is, in my mind, a little bit easier to be the needle than the one looking for the needle in the haystack. That you have to exploit a lot of vulnerabilities, right? You have to find the vulnerabilities to exploit as a red teamer. But looking through all of the events that are happening in an environment as a blue teamer and making sure your detections are good and making sure that you're able to find the evil when it occurs and then remediate it and then do a full investigation. There are so many things that are easy to miss as a blue teamer. I really do believe that the challenge curve on that side of the house is a little bit steeper. But it's not as sexy, is it? Everybody wants to be the hacker. Is there a specific reason a system doesn't straight up drop and blacklist a connection after, say, 10 consecutive tries? Is it purely for client convenience? That's a really interesting question, Kaiser. It depends on the system in question and the nature of the connection. So, for example, Palo Alto firewalls will be, real-time analyzing traffic. And if it determines that the traffic matches a pattern that it knows to be malicious, it'll kill the connection, exactly as you're saying. But if the firewall isn't configured that way, it won't drop the connection. Now that's the firewall side of the house.
This is from Siamese Youth. You're listening to Night Ride FM.
Okay, but let's talk about host-based firewalls or anything else like that. Lockout policies are organization specific or block specific. So, for example, for SSH, there's a tool called fail to ban, right? And what it does is it looks for repeat offenders, basically, or other patterns of malicious behavior. And as soon as it finds those, it just creates firewall rules for the host that prevents the attempt. But yeah, a lot of places don't have aggressive account, lockout policies or disable policies after repeated attempts. It really depends on the kinds of controls you have in the environment. All right, what are we up to today? Okay, just going right in. How many events were returned for all time? We're just going to do index equals star to just get everything. Yes, and there are wildcards, by the way, which wasn't covered in the previous training, but... Okay, about 250,000, 239,659. What? What if I just do... Oh, it's many more. No, 239,659. Comma? Oh, wait. I was just reading poorly. Oh, big question. Kaiser asks, would you say an implementation and standardization of such a defensive measure would be counterproductive? Because at the top of my head, I don't see anyone would not employ such systems, because even if the attacking machine has 1,000 proxies to attack, it's still significantly delaying it, right? you'd be surprised how quickly Fireprox works for switching up your source IPs and like routing it through AWS to create new IPs for X number of requests. But yes, I believe that lockout policies and max number of attempts are not just a good idea, they're actually required by certain standards. If you go into ISO 27000s or the NIST 800-53s, those standard sets require those kind of baseline policies to be enabled. I believe PCI DSS requires them too. So yes, I absolutely believe that they should be. The why anyone would not, it's the same answers as always, right? That it was hard, or there was some reason why it was too much work at the time. It's human laziness, right? Path of least resistance. We didn't need it, so we didn't do it. Security is difficult in organizations because it's asking people to take action to prevent things that haven't happened yet. And it's very difficult for folks to see the value there when it hasn't happened yet. If the last year has taught us anything, it's that people are just rubbish at risk assessment, right? They don't understand how to assess potential risk and what their exposure in the case of the pandemic literally was going to be. And so, security's primary job is asking people to look ahead in a way that they're not wired to do. Yep. Now, I will also say, in defense of administrators who are always overworked, right? I mean, sysadmins out there, how many of you feel like you have not enough work to do? Right? That's not a thing. And so very often there will be, at least to their mind, very good reasons why they haven't employed what they feel is a needless security control that's going to add some sort of operational complexity. Security is always this tightrope dance between usability of a system and the actual security of it. Because if you put in so many security controls that the system becomes unusable, you've actually compromised InfoSec anyway, right? Because remember, we have to do confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you put in so many controls that the system is not usable, you've compromised availability, so that's no good. And I would also add that if people are going to find a way to work that makes sense for them, and so if you're put in so many security controls in your organization that it's really onerous for people to do their jobs, they're going to find ways around it. And I know this because I've created security policies for a number of different organizations and always marveled at how the users are going to find ways around it. Any parent who with kids of school age knows this. If your school gives out devices, right? The school's going to have a content filter on the device, right? Whether it's take home or at school, there's going to be a content filter so they can't get to inappropriate sites or they can't get to games or whatever. And the kids are going to know how to get around it. They absolutely will. Why? Because the content, it's not always, sometimes it's to play games, but it's also because very often those content filters are so freaking aggressive that it actually impacts how they do their schoolwork, and teachers will complain about it. It's like, oh, I couldn't get to this YouTube video, or I couldn't get to this site I needed because it thought it was inappropriate. And so both teachers and students will find ways to get around those controls. Okay, soapbox over. Back over to what we're doing. We're searching for the CSV source type. Source type equals CSV. And what's our answer here? For events containing update or insert statements, but not those with email. Okay, so now we're doing some Boolean stuff. So we're doing CSV, right? Notice that these are SQL queries. So we're going to do some parentheses here. We're going to look for update or, and notice that or is a special keyword, right? Update or insert and not, actually we can just do not, and what is this? Not email. Okay. So we have updates. Theoretically, there are inserts somewhere in here. How many events for all time? 6,244. Great. How many events matched on the 28th of April? Wait. 2020. How do you get access to Rangeforce? Do you have to request a demo and have a work email? Trevor, no. Rangeforce has a free tier, and it has some of these modules available as a free tier. You can just sign up. You can log in with GitHub, Google, set up an email account. Let me, excuse me. So in incognito mode here, if I do like log in, you can just, I think, just sign up, right? Because it does have a free tier. But I will say that I like their paid material, their training material so much that I would recommend, especially if you work in a SOC or you work on a blue team, I would recommend seeing if it's within your budget to get the training, especially for new analysts. This is a great amount of onboarding material for new analysts who are just coming into the industry or just coming into an organization. You never want to have one analyst who's the only one who knows how to do everything on the team. You want to make sure that those skills are socialized around so that, not just if that person leaves or gets hit by a bus or something happens, that you still have that knowledge, but so that people can meaningfully work together to solve and work cases, right? You never want to have any member of your team feel like they're out there on their own without any support. That's a really bad environment to be working in. I've worked in those environments. It's not great. You want to make sure that there's enough expertise on the team so that you can back each other up. 211. What is the average duration? That's interesting. So that's really cool. Do we have a duration field? We do. So we're going to get the average duration. Of queries that match this search. So they didn't actually teach us how to do this, but they're asking for it anyway. So what they want us to do is take the duration field and average it. To do that, they're asking, what we're going to do is pipe the results, all of these events, into the stats function, which allows us to perform aggregation against fields. So if we pipe it to stats, and we're going to do AVG for average, and then give it a field name, in this case, duration, which is capitalized. Yes. We will get a very tiny table, right? Which is 18 dot, what is it? Rounded to the second? Rounded to 1 decimal place, so 18.4. And that's how we do that. So this is really kind of getting to the next level of what you can do with Splunk, is this kind of statistical aggregation. Really, really important. Okay, next. By default, source host and source type are selected fields, but these can be changed. Yep, okay. So we're going to search for events since the 24th. And what was the rest of our query? The action was purchase. So these are web logs. And the bytes, which can be parsed as an integer, was greater than, what was it, 1500? So we had inequality operators as well. And you can see that our bytes now include only values greater than 1500. And they wanted us to look at the fields bytes, client IP, and refer domain, which... Okay, so 1689 is the total number of events. What is the client IP on the most recent event? Now, I'm going to show you another way to do this. They're asking us to change selected fields, but there's another way to do this, which is using the pipe and the table, not tabs, a table function, which will create our statistical table of only the fields that we care about. In this case, we want bytes, client IP, and refer domain. Bytes, client IP, and refer domain. By the way, about refer, I don't know if it messes with anybody else, but that is not how you spell the word referrer. It just isn't, right? If I look for referrer, it has 2 R's in the dictionary. Why doesn't it in the HTTP header? Because they made a mistake in the HTTP spec back in the day when they were writing it. They made a typo, they misspelled the word refer, the spec got accepted, and that's just how it is now. All right, so we're going to run this table. And you'll see that we just get those fields back, right? We no longer see the timestamp, we no longer see the raw message, we're just getting these fields. And I'm actually going to add in the underscore time, just so we can see the timestamp and understand that it's the most recent. All right, so the client IP is right here. What? Oh, weird. Was it not sorted by time? That might have been the problem. It was not sorted by time. So if we wanted to do that again, if we wanted to do the table as we did it before, right? Time, bytes, and then we would sort it minus time, right? So it's descending. There we go. That's the right client IP. So when we do our own custom table, we have to resort by the field that we care about. So just a heads up on that. It won't automatically sort by time. What is the value of refer domain? Gromit, great question. Why does only time have an underscore? Because it is not a field parsed from the event itself. It is a field generated by Splunk. It's right here. So this is generated by Splunk. There's going to be two fields, generally speaking, that have an underscore. The first is underscore time, which is the timestamp of the event, and the other one is underscore raw, which is the raw message, right? It's not a parsed field, it's just the raw message. So if I wanted to just use the raw, that's how I would do it. Really good question. Nope, that's not right. HTTPS. Come on, I just had this. Hey Angel, welcome back. Hope it was tasty times. Oh, www.buttercupgames.com. For report, there are there's more than one, but yeah. If we get rid of this, the header is, I believe, just refer. Yeah. Yep, and there's the note that the name refer is actually a misspelling of the word refer. Okay. Oh, love it. Okay, so now we're going to be doing the top. Nope, it's right here. It's just refer, but there was also refer domain, which was parsed separately, which we put in our selected fields here. Oh, yeah, it's, that parsing is, I think it's up to you because it's how you name the fields. Yeah. So here, we're doing all time, presumably. So what we're doing here is we're going to get a top for the refer domain. And top by default is going to give you 5. If I wanted top 20, I'd still get, or I guess I would by default will give you 10. I would say limit equals 20. But there's only 5 in the set, so that's what we get. Okay. What is the second most popular category ID? Arcade. Oh, associated with purchase actions. So we have to change that up. Oh, still arcade. What was the count of the most common status code in the first 7 days of May? Oh, good lord. Okay. Let's put this back in. And what we want to do is we want to get most common status code. Is a status code a field we have? Oh, is it really? Which one? Okay, we do have status. The first 7 days in May. Okay, that's the first 7 days of May. Now, is there a method here? Yes, there is. Okay, awesome. So, what's the count of the most common status? So what we're going to do is we're going to do pipe to table count, or no, stats count status, and then sort minus count, because count is a new field that's generated when you do one of these count aggregations. Oops. Count by status is what I wanted. My bad. Awesome. So obviously 200s were the most common status code, and then 503 was the second most common. Let's count. 26329. Awesome. For all time, what was the most common refer domain for HTTP status codes other than 200? So HTTP status codes other than 200. So we're going to do status not equals 200. We can do a negation with an exclamation point or a bang. And for all time, most common refer domain. So we're going to search by refer domain, or count by refer domain. And that's going to be for all time. Wouldn't that have been true anyway? For HTTP status codes other than 200. Oh, games. There we go. What is the 11th highest count of combinations of category ID and refer domain? All right. So we'll use the top command for this. And what fields? Category ID and referrer domain. So what it's doing is it's aggregating them. And we also have to do limit equals 11 because I think it's asking for the 11th most, right? Yes. And so, by the way, top is just a shortcut. Like top is the same thing that we were doing with count, right? It's count by and then limit equals whatever. So just and sorting by the count. Welcome, Boo-Foo Raiders. Welcome to the Splunk party. Oh, hold on a second. I'm not really sure how they want us to... Oh, the count. That was dumb. 185. There we go. As you started running transforming commands, note that the results you saw in the statistics tab, previous adventure searches always showed up in the events tab. Yes. If you are searching in, this is really, really important. If you are searching in verbose mode, then both tabs will be populated and you can switch between them. But if you are in smart mode, then only one or the other will be available according to whether your search includes transforming commands. Fast mode is generally only used for dashboards and reports where an expensive search is being run, but it's gathering very specific information in the most efficient way. So, if you know you just want the visualization, you don't need to look at the individual events, fast mode is fine. If you're not sure, and it depends on the kind of query you're running, you can do smart mode. If you know that you're going to want both the visualization or the statistics table and the raw event count, the raw events to look through individually, you have to be in verbose mode. And in terms of performance, right, verbose mode is going to be the slowest and heaviest hitter. Then smart mode, then fast mode, right? So just be aware of that you can change your search modes depending on what you need, and it can really improve your performance depending on how much data you're pulling back. So here we're asking for rare client IPs. There we go. So rares are going to be kind of the long tail, the lowest numbers, right? And then when you get it back, you're going to see that notice that the count kind of goes up. There are so few IPs here that the tops and the rares are going to overlap. But that's really not going to be true in most real data sets. And rare is really, really interesting because depending on how you specify the search, you can find some really interesting stuff with the long tail. This is what we call long tail analysis, right? The stuff that's kind of out there on the edges. It's not that common. But Angel made a point a little bit earlier that your sophisticated attackers, they're going to be hiding in the noise. And so if you can come up with really cool searches for rare stuff, it might be really worthwhile. One that I like to do is rare long DNS queries. So if I find a DNS query that is super long, that could be a sign of DNS exfiltration, right? Or C2 over a DNS channel. And if the attacker is being careful, then they're going to limit their noise. So I'm not going to see it in any top lists anywhere. Long is in multiple times. No, literally long, like string length. Because with DNS over C2 exfiltration, basically what they're doing is they're base 64 encoding data and making it subdomains for the sub. Yeah, exactly. And then they're sending that to their own server, right? And they're catching it, but then they're decoding the first part of the subdomain back into... Yeah, exactly, with DGA or similar. Exactly right. That's a fun one you can do. You have to be careful in your environment with it though, because what you'll find is that there's a lot of stuff that uses gigantic DNS queries for basic stuff. Like Sophos. This drove me crazy. Sophos, if you have Sophos in your environment, sophosxl.net. If you look this up, you'll find out that if you have, I think it's the web protection stuff, they're going to have all this crap going to sophosxl.net with these crazy queries. Yeah, like, look at this. Doesn't this look evil? But it's actually, it's data encoded. Basically, it's a look ahead. So it's for web protection. So what it's doing is, like, when you make a DNS request yourself, what Sophos is doing is it's taking the DNS request, encoding it in this subdomain, sending it to Sophos to do a posture check on that domain to see if it knows about it, and then sending it back over a DNS channel. It's pretty wild. I don't like it. It's really noisy. But if you have Sophos in your environment, you'll see this kind of stuff all the time. Yeah, browser extensions do this as well. Okay. The least number of events. It's this 188, right? Yeah. Oh, I mean, ads are just gross, right? You'll see. That's another one. I have a particular search that I do for gross top level domains, right? Anything from like .xyz, .info, .biz, .tk. Like, you should be watching those. And actually, unless you have a business reason, you should consider blocking those TLDs. Like, nothing good's going there. Are you really going to be missing out if you can't get yandex.ru through your environment? Probably not. So, okay, so 183. Yeah, obfuscated JavaScript, pretty gross. Client IP and action events. Okay, that would be this one right here. You're interviewing for a SOC role on Tuesday. Any advice? Gromit, well, first of all, good luck. Can I ask, are you coming to the table with any certifications under your belt? If not, that's okay. It's just going to change the advice. Just CompTIA. Don't sell CompTIA short. That's really good. And you've got AWS. That's awesome. So for like a SOC analyst role, yeah, I think that know kind of going in how your previous work experience, to Angel's point, how your previous work experience is going to translate into success in this role. And it doesn't always have to be a super straight line. So, for example, you know, I was coming from being an educator before I became an analyst, and I had to explain, I obviously was in IT, but I had to demonstrate how my prior experience in, you know, consuming a lot of information, right, parsing it and then synthesizing it and sending it elsewhere, was going to be valuable. So yeah, QA, absolutely. QA is going to be important for analytical skills. That's absolutely correct. Attention to detail is maybe the most important skill in a SOC, right? And understanding the importance of procedure, right? Making sure that the steps are followed, making sure that you have all of the boxes checked, so that, you know, when an alert comes in, are you following the right procedure? Can you disposition it quickly and correctly? And then, you know, get the information to the next step if you need to escalate it or whatever else you need to do. Yeah, I would also, that's another great point. If you come off as somebody who's curious, that's definitely a win for the SOC, right? Somebody who wants to investigate, wants to learn, and demonstrates that they're trying to expand their skill set. That's going to be a huge win. Nobody likes somebody to stay stagnant. Yeah, not a day goes by that I'm not searching for something I don't know. That's how that goes. It's impossible to have it all in your head. I will also say, so I've been doing some interviewing recently, not looking for jobs, but interviewing candidates. If you have some scripting, if you do, that's cool. If you have some scripting, that's going to be a huge thing to bring up, just saying like, hey, I know how to automate stuff. But even more than that, so you've done CompTIA. My big recommendation is to go refamiliarize yourself with the standards that are relevant to the industries that your SOC is going to be working with. So if you're going to be working with a SOC that deals with, well, really, NIST 853 is going to be important anywhere you go. So familiarize yourself with those standards, okay? Know how to speak with them, or speak about them with some authority. Check out the ISO 27000s. Those are really important. And PCI DSS. Understanding those standards and where baselines should be, really, really valuable to understand kind of where the shortcomings might be in an organization that is sending you their events. Okay. Where we've done stats, right? But yeah, you know what, Gromit? I have a good feeling. I think you're gonna kill it. Oh, dude, if you've worked with Java and you've worked with Selenium, I mean, you're miles ahead. You have all sorts of experience that folks don't have. Being able to understand how software works from the programming level really just opens up your ability to understand events that a computer emits, right? And so that's a huge win for you, absolutely. And also, if you've spent time looking at documentation for programming languages and writing code, yeah, you definitely have all of these analytical skills that you've used previously that are going to matter. Okay, let's see. You can also, what are we doing? How many total events had the HTTP status of 200 in the month of May? Oh, stats. I want just May 2020. Yeah, don't fake it. That's a great point. Don't fake it. If you don't know something, feel comfortable saying I'm not that familiar with that, but I'm learning, or something like that. But yeah, don't just shovel BS. That's a huge turnoff. And hey, Gromit, if you have any other questions before the interview, hop in the Discord. Ask us. Wow, good timing. I didn't even do that. It just happened. But hop in the Discord and ask questions. I'm sure we'll be able to answer. I'll certainly do what I can to answer any questions that you have. Thanks, Nightbot, for that excellent timing. So in the month of May, 105, 195. In April 2020, which user agent made the most requests that didn't have the 200 status? So status not equals 200, status count by user, a user. Okay. And we're doing April. 30 days, now September, April, June. It's like, how many days does April have? All right. Made the most requests. So we want to sort minus count here. That's that ancient Firefox. For statuses of 200, which combination of HTTP method and URI path was the most prevalent in May of 2020? So back to status of 200. And which combination of HTTP method and URI path was the most prevalent? So method, URI path. And they wanted May, right? Wait, what? No. Okay. Which combination of HTTP method and URI path? So get/product.screen. Awesome. And stats, which we've been doing, or we did before for the average. Okay, so we're going to start from status equals 200 for all time. This next query. Yeah, that's a great point. Talk about stuff that you do, like CTFs. If you have a Try Hack Me account or you have a Hack the Box, right? You know, name dropping this isn't going to do you any good, but say, hey, I spend my weekends watching instructional content to learn more about these tools. In fact, last weekend I was watching a stream about using Splunk. They're going to like seeing that you're interested in building your skills that way. So good. Yeah, setting up a security onion lab is a big a deal. Okay. Stats, average bytes. Of remove actions. $2,084.4. Yeah, definitely let us know what happens. Which refer a domain has the most unique values of file. I'm not sure what this is asking for here. So see how we're in smart mode and I can't have the events? I want verbose mode, so I'm gonna come over here. There we go. Which is not surprising that Buttercup Games is the one that has the most values for files. Yeah, the field was files. So to get that was kind of an interesting one. They didn't spell that one out. So we needed to get the values, right? And then we also had to count by the referrer domain. Okay. All right, well, that does it for this module. Could I expand it? What do you want me to expand, Angel? Yeah. Oh, actually, this isn't doing anything. I got it right, but this query isn't actually doing what I said it was doing. So values files. Yeah, not quite right. So if you expand the files group to see which is the file, is how would that look? So yeah, that's a good question. I don't.
We wander through each other's lives just like the rivers, constant flow and signs of life in all our eyes. Keep this city on the go.
Oh, is it make MV?
The sun will rise, the sun will set. 7 days, 5 and 2 from this life
Yeah.
to the next.
Change the specified field to multivariate field during a search. So if we do just files, right?
In every class, in every school, at every desk, where time's well spent waking up to break the rules, waiting for the week to end. The same old tale repeats itself, 9 to 5, year on year, thoughts and hopes left on the shelf.
Yeah, that's not right.
On Friday, get caught on Monday. Escape on Friday, get caught on Monday. The sun will rise, the sun will set. 7 days, 5 and 2 from this life into the next. We're all just trying to make it.
If I just do value files,
We're all just trying to make it through. How the crowds emerge at night, transform
not files. That was dumb. Value file.
wonderlight, glimpsed in dreams but rarely found.
Right. What's interesting is that
All through midnight streets you'll hear.
we are getting all the events
Party hard to number.
or all the file values, right?
Escape on Friday,
Um,
on Monday.
oh, but if we do, here we go. This is what we actually want. Refer domain file. So this tells us, I think, is this kind of close to what you're asking? Like, you wanted refer a domain by the count of each file value? That's what that would give you. Right, exactly. All right. We're going to end this module.
It's always work and never love.
Okay, taking its sweet time to end. But I think that's going to do it for today, friends. That was some good work. We have a couple of other Splunk modules in here, but I think it was a really good start. And then I think what we'll do, if there's some interest, is we'll take what we've done here and actually tackle one of the boss of the SOC rooms maybe next week. But until then, let's see if there's someplace fun that we can send folks. Ain't nobody streaming right now but me and RWX Rob, but it's always a gamble whether there's somebody actually watching. So that's going to be it for today. Thanks so much for hanging out. Don't forget to check us out on the Discord, and Hack Summer is coming. There will be more information about that probably later this weekend. So if you want to up your Linux game, that's going to be a great way to do it. We'll be back on Tuesday with some offensive stuff. Not offensive like content advisory, just red team. And on Wednesday, we'll be doing some more programming. So until then, please be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and happy hacking.